everyone, it's me, Cassidy, again. So, the Vancouver 2010 Paralympic Winter Games have officially begun. Today is the 4th day out of 9, so there's only 5 days left, and I cannot believe how fast it is flying by. So, since it's half over, I figured I should tell you what I've been doing. Now, first of all, before I get into it, I must say, you might not think that I look like a soaking wet, freezing cold dog right now. However, you are very wrong, because I have been standing out in the rain at Whistler Creekside all day. Which was fun, don't get me wrong. However, the wind was blowing so strong that it blew the finish line banners off the mountain. Okay? That's how ridiculous it was. On top of being windy, it was pouring rain, and I'm talking pouring rain. This isn't like Seattle, little misty rain. This was pouring rain. But I had a poncho on. However, the combination of the wind and the rain made it so that my face was soaking wet. There was always slanted rain coming at me from every direction, and then my poncho would get blown off me as well because it was so windy. My notebook was soaking wet, so I had to write on it underneath the poncho when I was getting quotes from all the athletes, which gets a little bit difficult when your poncho is very wet and has droplets of water all over it, so you can't even see through your poncho to see what you're writing. But soggy paper, wet face, soaking wet poncho, I fought through it. And it was actually pretty fun. I'm the kind of person who likes a challenge, especially a fun challenge, so I really can't complain. I was standing outside at the beautiful Whistler Creekside, interviewing Paralympians all day. So what's wrong with that? Today was women's and men's giant slalom, visually impaired, and sitting. Now, you might not know exactly what those means. Many people that I have talked to ask, how can there be blind skiers? What you may not know is that all of these visually impaired skiers have a guide with them. This guide can be a friend, a husband or a wife, a coach, and the guide skis about 10 feet in front of the visually impaired athlete so that they know exactly where to turn, when to go straight, and how to make it down the course safely. These guides communicate with their visually impaired skiers in many different ways. Some of them have a megaphone strapped to their back while they're skiing down, which shouts out commands like right, left, straight, so that the athlete can hear. There are 3 different classes for the visually impaired skiers, B1, B2, and B3. So some of the skiers can't see anything at all. However, some of the visually impaired skiers do have a little bit of vision, so they can see a little bit of color and a little bit of shape, so they can follow their guide down the course and see just a little bit of how their guide is going. So if they see their guide is turning, then they can follow them. The other part of the event today was the sit skiers, and the sit skiers are on what's called a monoski, and they have these little things in each hand called outriggers, which basically function as ski poles, but they have a little tiny ski on the bottom of them. So there you go. There's a little bit of Paralympic knowledge to fill your brain. Now, I don't know about you, but I honestly really cannot imagine skiing with these kind of disabilities that these Paralympians have. Can you imagine going down a ski course and really not being able to see where you're going? I really don't think I could do it. Or with sit skiing, there are so many things that you don't think about when you're skiing on the mountain with 2 legs. I talked to Elena Nichols from Team USA, who just won the gold medal for women's giant slalom sitting today, and she told me a really interesting thing that I'd never thought about before. I asked her about how the rainy and snowy and foggy weather affects her racing, and she told me that for sit skiers, it makes it much more difficult because they don't have the 2 knees to absorb that shock. So if they're going down the race course and they hit little bumps, little micro terrain, little ruts in the snow, and they can't see it because of the fog, they can't absorb it with their knees. I really hadn't thought about that before. Whenever I go skiing, I know that if I just keep my knees bent and I'm ready to absorb that shock, then I can pretty much run over any kind of little bump and make it okay. These Paralympians have really just honestly made me think about how fortunate I am to be healthy and to have all of my limbs and just to be able to ski for a day without having to worry about all of these tiny little things that they have to think about every second of their lives. I also got to work yesterday at the women's and men's long-distance cross-country races at Whistler Paralympic Park. The races that I got to watch yesterday were the visually impaired and the standing races. And it was really interesting to watch how the guides and the athletes interacted, because sometimes many of the athletes actually went faster than their guides and got ahead of them, which I thought was kind of funny because the guides are expected to be just as fast or faster than the athletes because they have to stay ahead of them the whole time. Another thing that happened in the cross-country events was that they started the standing events about 15 minutes before they started the visually impaired events. And now, for the long-distance cross-country races, for the men, that's 20 kilometers, which takes them almost an hour to complete the whole race. So, when you start the visually impaired skiers 15 minutes after you start the standing skiers, obviously they're all going to be on the course at the same time because they go 3 times around the same track. So, a couple of times yesterday, the standing skiers would be going around, they would start to lap the visually impaired athletes, and then the visually impaired athletes would get a little bit away from their guide and would end up running into one of the standing skiers, and all of a sudden there would be about 4 or 5 skiers on the ground in the middle of the course. Now, don't worry, they all ended up being fine. No one was injured or anything. But one of the athletes from France, it was his birthday yesterday. I felt really bad. But when I talked to him after the race, he was fine. He was very happy to just be racing in the Paralympics on his birthday. That's one of the things I've noticed that all these Paralympian athletes have in common. They are all just so happy to be here. They don't really care if they win a medal, if they get in 20th place or 6th place. They're just happy that they're here at the Paralympics. I talked to Shannon Dallas from Team Australia today, and he ended up finishing in 6th place in the men's giant slalom sitting event. And I actually started talking to him when he was in 2nd place. And then, as I was talking to him, he got bumped to 3rd, bumped to 4th, bumped to 5th, bumped to 6th. And at first, he seemed a little bit sad that he got bumped off the podium, but he told me 6th place was the best that he's finished this entire year, so he can't complain, really. He's just happy to be here, because with all of his injuries, he's had to overcome so much just to be at the Paralympics. So yeah, that's what's been going on with me and the Vancouver 2010 Paralympic Winter Games. That's the official title. I will be sure to catch you up on all the exciting action in a few days, but for now, if you can, read articles about the Paralympics, watch it on TV if you can find it. It really is amazing. These athletes are so inspiring, and I hope that I can do something as great as them someday.